The artworks in this show portray the deeply personal work stories of a diverse group of women and are accompanied by the data that tells a bigger story. The women profiled are a mix of ages, ethnicities, sexual orientations, occupations, and socioeconomic statuses. And today we're so excited to be joined by Dawline, Lauren, and Sara, who are featured in this project. And Sawyer Rose, our artist, is going to be telling us about her process and facilitating a conversation with these lovely ladies. So I just want to mention that Sawyer's show is open until January 23rd, so I encourage you to all come visit. These are our hours, and you can find all the details on our website. And I want to acknowledge our sponsors. I really want to acknowledge the County of Santa Clara Commission on the Status of Women who made this program possible today. Thank you so much. And all of the sponsors of this show. And I also want to say a thank you to all of the sponsors that help make our virtual programs possible. So thank you very much. Now I'm going to pass it off to Sawyer.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to see you here. I'm really excited to share the Carrying Stones project with you and introduce you to these amazing women and their work stories. So for those of you who don't already know, aren't familiar with the Carrying Stones project, it's a project about women's working lives and the amounts of paid and unpaid labor that women are doing. So cooking, cleaning, caring, so childcare and elder care, those responsibilities still land on women more heavily than men in every country in the world right now. And the upshot of that is it takes women's time and energy away from advancing at work and in society. And even community volunteerism, which I look at as caretaking of the larger community, that also falls mostly to women. So, in schools, in nonprofits, houses of worship. So there's an imbalance there too. So as an artist, once I found out all these facts, I was inspired to look at the imbalances more broadly by looking at all the different ways that women work and what the effects of this gendered work inequity are. The tilted playing field that women are on in the labor force and at home affects women physically and emotionally, as well as economically, of course. So the way I found to do this was I started finding project participants, like the women we're going to speak to today, women of all kinds of diverse backgrounds. So different ages, different races, different work functions, with kids, without kids, and so on. As many different ones as I could find. And I'm still working on it. I mean, I could work from now until forever, and because everybody's work story is different. And I asked them if they were willing to track their hours, their paid labor hours and unpaid labor hours. And I developed a custom timekeeping app for the project that the participants could just use on their phones. So, they would input what they did each hour of the days while they were tracking their data. So they could go like paid, 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 unpaid, other, whatever. So for all of their waking hours. And then I translated that data into a large scale data visualization sculpture of the numbers that they had given me. And you can actually read them. You can see what each woman was doing with her time. And, in general, what almost all the pieces have shown is, that women are working so much of the time, either on paid or unpaid labor, and there are very few breaks in their schedules. And so then after that sculpture was finished, and this is where I cross from data visualization into more like storytelling. I take a photographic portrait of the subject of the piece, lifting and carrying the hours, the representation of her hours. So like literally shouldering her burden in a physical, real way. So that's what we'll be looking at today. But, today's program is really exciting because we're going to sort of like do a deep dive into the stories behind the pieces. The women's stories are the true heart of the project. It's the whole point of doing the thing, is to learn about how different women work. And the stories are personal and they're compelling and they're really important for understanding what's going on. So let me quickly introduce the women we're going to be speaking with today. Lauren Aresa is an associate professor of history in Granville, Ohio. During the data collection for this project, she was also chairing her department, which is a role that she says she is thankful to no longer hold. She's mom to an energetic 8-year-old and daughter, Rita. And in the 2020-2021 academic year, she was on sabbatical and she was supposedly conducting historical research during that time, but actually she was managing her daughter's remote schooling. Thank you for being here, Lauren. Dawline Jane Oni-Esele is an Oakland-based visual artist and arts educator. Hi, Dawline Jane. She's currently the virtual studio director at Naiad Arts Center in Richmond, which is a nonprofit arts organization that supports artists with intellectual and physical disabilities. Dawline Jane also facilitates workshops at Facebook Open Arts, and she's a freelance illustrator, and she works on her own personal arts practice in her Berkeley studio. Hi, Dawline Jane. And Sara Owens lives in the Bay Area with her husband and her 14-year-old dog, Chewy, and her 2 children, Finn, who's 8 years old, and Josephine, her 6-year-old daughter. Josephine was born with a rare genetic syndrome that causes global development delays. And Sara works at a San Francisco-based advertising agency heading up the analytics department. And she also serves on the board of the PTA at her children's school to advocate for equity and inclusion. So, hi, Sara. Thanks for being with us. So, already you can tell that these are 3 amazing women who are doing profound things with their time. So, I will quickly share the pieces, the artwork pieces that I made for each of their stories, and you can see Dawline Jane's pieces up on the screen. Hers is made of textile materials, mostly. And the way I thought about this piece was there are actually stones, carrying stones in this piece. Dawline, at the time of the data collection, was doing a ton of volunteer work, a ton of unpaid work. So I really looked at that, and the gold looking sacks have the rocks in them. Like, those are the paid hours that she collected money for. And then the silver tone sacks, you can see the stones are down on the floor. Those are the unpaid hours where she worked, but she didn't collect the money. Dawline and I know each other from way back. We like the art scene in different places, and we always cross paths. And one time we crossed paths in an event, and I asked her what she was doing with her time, and she told me this amazing, like, I've got like 6 positions right now and I'm just running back and forth between them. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have to be in my project. This is unbelievable. So it's just been really fascinating to find out what she's doing. Next slide. So here's a detail of a different installation. The installation you saw before is at NUMU right now. This is an installation from 2019, so you could get a close-up of what those sacks look like, and the weighty ones and the non-weighty ones. Not that unpaid labor is not weighty, it definitely is, but it's not afforded as much weight in our society. So that's sort of the symbolism I was using here. Next slide. And I look at this photo shoot outtake and I'm like, why didn't I use that one? And it was it was very close. And it just, I feel like both the outtake and the picture I chose show her strength and her humor and her just amazing personality. I kind of couldn't go wrong with all the photo shoot pictures that I had of her. So it made my life easy and happy that they were all amazing. But I really liked that one. And here's another installation view, so you can get sort of another idea of what the sacks look like when, you know, they're weighted and unweighted. And you can see how in installation view, the photographic portrait lift, the final version, is always, you know, with next to the piece about the person it's talking about. Next slide. All right, cool. Here's Lauren's piece. This is one of the new pieces that has debuted at the museum. It's never been shown before, and it was completed in May. So as you heard in the introduction, Lauren's a professor of history. So I made her hourly units look sort of like books. And, you know, we've got wood and chains, and Lauren and I know each other from way back at Williams College, and we have stayed in touch ever since. And so it was great. It was a great excuse to get to see her again as well. An interesting thing about Lauren's piece, next slide. You can see, which you can see really well here in detail, is I hide a lot of Easter eggs in the pieces that I make about the people, so that it's not just about their story, but it reflects their personality or their circumstances as much as possible. So for example, in this one, I was trying to decide what sizes to make the book pieces. And so because she's a professor and a mother, I looked up the sizes of academic publishing books, and I looked up the sizes of children's publishing books, and I made the brown books were her professional work hours, and the white books were her you know, at home domestic production hours, and the sizes, the publishing sizes accordingly. So you know, all the pieces have, you know, either like somebody's favorite color or just little personal bits of information about them in it. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, so this is just a quick shot to show you what goes on underneath before all the magic happens on top. There's like layers and layers and layers of underpaint and texture that goes into these things to make them really robust. But you know, maybe you don't expect to see bright orange and green underneath, but that's how they're made. Next slide, please. And finally, this is Sara. This is the newest piece in the show, and it was installed in August. And the colors that I used for this are a bit out of my comfort zone, but Sara is a bold and wonderful person, and I thought, you know, I would go bold and wonderful as much as I could too, to try to reflect her personality. Next slide. You can see here in the detail, I do a lot in my pieces with ties and tethers, knots and things, to like talk about how women's labor both sort of, you know, it holds things together, but it also sort of ties the woman down sometimes. So these are the knots and the hooks that I used in this particular piece, but the symbolism sort of goes throughout all the pieces. And next. And this is just a quick shot to give you scale on that one, because you can't really tell. It's really very large. All the pieces are very large because I'm trying to give women's stories space, as much space, an obnoxious amount of space, so that we can really listen, and we can really notice, and we can really take note, and you know, set aside time and space to be with the stories. Next. So now I'm super excited to turn the floor over to our panelists today. My first question for the women who've joined us is if you could just tell us a bit about who you are and what your paid and unpaid labor involves. You can tell us maybe a little bit about what you do now, but also what you were doing at the time when we decided to work together on your data. So, does anybody want to go first? Maybe Dawline Jane?
Sure, since I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's really nice to connect here. So I was kind of looking through everything that I had, trying to see when it was that we first had this conversation. And it looks like it was about 2016. At that time, as Sawyer mentioned, I was kind of in a place in my life where I was putting together a lot of teaching work. I was primarily a teaching artist. And so for that, I was traveling to different school sites in different places, whether it was an art center or a school. And also, I believe doing some volunteer board work, and something else. 2016 feels like a lifetime ago, although I do remember being exhausted. So that is like the clearest memory of 2016 that I have. Now, I am primarily working from home, and as it was mentioned in my introduction, I am the virtual studio director at Nyack Art Center in Richmond, which is an art center for artists with disabilities. And we moved kind of primarily virtual during shelter in place. So I kind of was onboarded to kind of help facilitate that process, as well as working again on other sites. At Facebook and just kind of other places, because I like getting and reaching different types of folks from kind of across the board. But less volunteer work now than before.
Thanks, Dawline. Sara, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I work in data and analytics. I've always loved problem solving. I actually studied math in college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to teach, but it was a good decision because then advertising went digital, and then data science took off as a discipline. And so I work at a San Francisco-based independent advertising agency and lead our analytics team. We're growing really fast, which is exciting, but means it's a lot of work, but a lot of problems to solve. And I was doing similar work at the time of my sculpture being created. I was at a bigger ad agency that's part of WPP, which is a big holding company. So much bigger organization. And so it's been a little bit different, but it's still been really exciting.
Thanks, Sara. Lauren.
Hi. So I've been thinking a lot about back to when we first talked about me being part of this project. So at the time I was chair of the history department, and chairs serve a 3-year term. And so you still teach. So I was still teaching. I didn't have to teach quite as much as I usually do. But then I was also in charge of all the various administrative pieces of a history department. The primarily one was, I think just about everybody in my department went through some sort of review process, either going through tenure or going up for full professor, which is like the highest level you can get to. So I was in charge of all of that. In addition, just as I said, to having to do my own work. And then being chair coincided with my daughter being ages 4 to 6. Yeah. Yeah, I think. Like it's all kind of a haze, even though it wasn't very long ago. And so one of the things that we were dealing with is, we know now that my daughter has some learning issues. She has dyslexia. She has an expressive communication disorder, but that was all being kind of figured out. So I was also in the middle of managing her education, working with her teachers, trying to get her in with a therapist, getting the diagnosis of the expressive communication disorder, and then other family challenges as well. So when Sawyer and I met to discuss we didn't meet to discuss being in the project. We met over brunch. I happened to be in her town when, gosh, it was for Christmas of like 18. And my grandmother had just passed. I grew up in the Bay Area, but I live in Ohio now. And my grandmother had passed in early December. She was 92. My grandfather had passed the year before. And it was really difficult because my family and I had already planned on going to California to hopefully spend one last Christmas with her. But then she passed, but I already had my tickets. And so then it was like this whole stressful thing of like, what do we do? Do we go back for the funeral? Do we not? Like, do we go later for Christmas? And kind of the family collectively decided that we would go back for Christmas. And so I happened to be staying, nearby. And I actually, the day of my grandmother's memorial, I was giving a final exam. And so I remember, Sawyer, you and I were sitting in your beautiful backyard in the sun. And you were asking me how things were going. And I was just like, I just remember saying to you, I was like, it's just crushing. Like everything felt so heavy, like emotionally, physically, like it was just crushing. And I really did feel the weight of it. And so then you were like, oh, hey, got a project for you. So now, I'm back to being an associate professor. I mean, it's not like I ever stopped, but I'm not chair anymore. And I did the math. There's so many people hired after me that I don't think I'll have to in another 30 years. So that means never, because I will definitely retire before that happens. So now it's just back to, grading, teaching, researching, but not having to oversee all the administrative minutiae in my department. So I'm thankful to not be doing that anymore. It's not so crushing anymore.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I remember that conversation well. So it seems from hearing all three of your stories, a common theme that goes through them is just there's so many different things happening all the time that have to be managed. So my next question is about the process of, becoming part of this project. Just curious to know how did it feel to collect your data and then see it in this physical form? What reactions did you have to that? And did you learn anything that you didn't already know? About yourselves, about your situation, your partner. Sara, do you want to?
Yeah. The first thing I think I felt was seen and vindicated. And just, I felt really seen. I think doing the day-to-day, when you're working hard day to day and carrying this weight, I identify so much with that feeling of it just being crushing in weight. You kind of you just have to get through the day, so you don't think about it. So it was really cool to take a step back and see it. What's interesting is because I work at an advertising agency, every employee, their hours are billable and we charge clients. And so we do timesheets. So like keeping the time, I'm so used to it. It's a habit that I think I was just kind of clicking and not thinking about it. So that part of it didn't bring any ahas to me, but I think seeing it visually and seeing how few gaps there are. I've been, trying to draw boundaries for myself. And that's the challenge for me, at least, with my paid labor, is that, I'm my own worst enemy, because I draw boundaries to myself, and then I don't respect them and I don't hold them. And so seeing that, I think, live, helped me start to think more about how I really do need to do that, because, why am I having headaches every day? Like, why am I stressed? Why am I not sleeping well? Why am I drinking so much wine during COVID? So yeah, I think it was feeling seen, and then kind of being faced with the reality of like, you need to make a change.
Yeah. And you were well, first of all, I should say that Sara is the only project participant who's approached me with an idea, which I love. I was like,
So
she asked me if I had done a piece about parenting a child with developmental disabilities. And I said, oh my God, no. And that definitely seems like something that needs to be talked about. So one thing that you said to me, Sara, what about the boundary setting was, especially when you're home with COVID, it's like you're working in the house, and then you've got your 8-year-old and you've got your 6-year-old, and they all need things from you all the time. And, in the particular circumstance of the pandemic, with everybody there was just, boundary setting was next to impossible.
It was, yeah. And I should start by saying, my husband, we're a modern family. He's a stay-at-home parent. And our daughter, as Sawyer just said, has a rare genetic syndrome called Dawline syndrome. So when she was born, we did not know. It didn't really present until she was about 5 months old. And then we knew she had low muscle tone. And then, the next couple of years, she just kept missing milestones. But it was like, well, the milestones are wide, right? Some kids walk at 10 months old and some don't walk till 18 months. And so I think, but each month that passed, it became more obvious that there was something going on. And then I think when she turned 4, or when she was 4 years old, we did the full exome. Is that what it's called? The genetic, I got part-time genetics degree during this whole thing. Not literally, but metaphorically. And so, yeah, it just, we figured it out when she was 4. And she was starting kindergarten during COVID, actually. And she had graduated from a preschool. So in California, where we live, there's a public preschool for special ed. And then, which was great and it was wonderful, but she was transitioning to elementary school, and we needed to find a special day class that would fit her needs, and we couldn't, because we couldn't tour. And then, moving to Zoom, that does not work for a child that has, communication delay, speech delay, and intellectual disability. So that was super, super tough. And then she didn't get any of her services either. Like, she gets all of her physical therapy and occupational therapy, and, up to 9 different appointments a week at school. And so the first few months were very rough because she didn't get anything. And then luckily, things kind of opened up for special ed in the fall of last year. But yeah, boundaries became non-existent during that time for sure. It was just a daily, just survive the day.
Yeah. Thanks. Dawline, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to see your data in physical form?
Yeah, I think that it's really easy for me to kind of like get to the end of a busy day sometimes and think, oh, I haven't done anything, because like, I have like these very specific like ideas of what accomplishment looks like. And so being able to track it and saying, okay, so maybe work starts at this time, but then there's this whole like setup and travel time that is built into that. And then, on the back end of that as well. And as a teacher, a lot of prep time as well that isn't paid a lot of the time. So for me, it helped to kind of clarify where all the time went. That I thought that, I wasn't doing things. But there's just so much going on in the course of a day.
Yeah,
So-
and that, go on.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And so that's something that we talk about before, like before Dawline, Jane and I actually drilled down into the data, we had a conversation and tried to, take those things and put them in buckets. It's like, going to work for the paid hours, yeah, that's work, but you also have to get to work. And you also, and then another thing we talk about is, emotional and mental labor. If you're thinking about, other people's needs, your work needs, whatever, like that's work as well. So, for all the participants, so I'm glad you brought that up, Dawline and Jane, because we have a series of interviews. So we talk initially about, what does work look like? And, what pieces of activities might be work that you weren't really thinking about.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say just like, in you saying that there's so much of a large component when you're working with probably everyone, but especially vulnerable populations, like when you think about kids and you're thinking about work that's like in that social capacity. With kids, it's like, at points I've had 465 kids, and it's like, is so-and-so eating? Is so-and-so off their game? This person seems to be having this kind of level of difficulty. And, a lot of folks, like, we know that teachers have this, but there's such a pull. There's a reason why we're in these professions. And so that drain and that like level of work doesn't get shut off when the last kid leaves the door, because sometimes the last kid doesn't leave the door because where are their parents? So there's a lot of labor in that.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you're like standing at the stove cooking your dinner, like still thinking about, what's that kid doing?
Right. When so-and-so said that, like, what did that mean? Do I have to talk to somebody about that? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So did participating in this project and seeing your data or tracking your data, did any of it have any lasting changes on how you approach your work or how you, talk to your partner, your boss, and did it change anything?
I definitely believe so, because I was kind of like brought up with this idea of this like work ethic where it's like you give 110% and like never let them see you sweat. And, if you're not in there at work 2 or 3 hours after you're supposed to be clocked out, then you didn't really go to work and you don't really have your heart in it. And now that is not the case. I'm able to kind of separate work from morality, which I think is like a big, huge, like, they talk about the Protestant work ethic. And so I think there's like this huge like thing where it's like there's work is morality. It's to have this like, oh, I've been, toiling all day and you don't understand, is this like big badge of honor. And now it's like, it's not. When I come into work in the morning and somebody had sent me an email maybe on Sunday, I will say I don't read my emails after I leave work. So until after that 9 a.m. meeting, that's when my email time is. I do not attach work to morality anymore. Which is a huge growth point, like as someone over 40. That's just not where my head has been for my entire adult life. So, that kind of frees up a lot more space to rest, because I think that self-care has become this big, like top branded thing. Where it's like, oh, I'm going to the spa, I'm going to this and that self-care. But now for me, self-care is saying like, I am not working now, I am doing something else, or I am just relaxing. I'm not thinking about anything. And that is mental health care. So that's what has changed. So thank you, Sawyer.
Oh my gosh, if I played any small part in a change like that, then I am grateful for my small part. Lauren, did anything change for you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, doing the the actual process of computing my working hours, like, definitely made it clear to me, like, how little time I was taking for myself, like, going off what Dolly was just saying, and like in any way. I was grading till I was falling asleep while I was reading. And so that's and so like computing that helped me. I mean, I knew that I was working all the time, but it really struck me like, wow, I am really working all the time except when I'm sleeping, and I'm not sleeping a whole lot. And then it was funny when I actually saw the whole piece, not just the piece of piece, but when you sent me a picture of the entire piece, like on the bottom row, there's kind of a big space. And I was like, when was that? Like, did I just get extra sleep last night, that one night? Like, I have no idea what that could be. But one thing that definitely stood out was how many more brown books there are. Like, as much as I was involved in, caregiving and all those like little ways, I think Sarah mentioned all the little, the things you remember, making the appointments. And like just the other day, I had to like make my husband's booster shot appointment for him because he wasn't doing it. So I just went ahead and did it. I was like, here, you're going to get your shot. So that kind of thing that we so often do, but it definitely struck me how many more books were my paid labor. And so then that combined with, I guess when we finished it, I was on sabbatical. And again, was supposed to be doing historical research for that year. And then because of the pandemic, like my archives were closed or my university wouldn't let me fly, or for all these various reasons, I didn't do nearly the amount of research that I was supposed to do. But it gave me a ton of time to spend with my daughter. And so I feel like we've gotten closer, and I've been really trying to not just make her more of a priority, but to let her know that she's more of a priority than maybe I made clear before. So I'm trying to be okay with not being where I want to be in terms of my scholarship. Like, I definitely should. I feel like, in terms of professional metrics, there's an expectation by this point in my career I should have published a certain amount, and I haven't. And it's been a real struggle to be okay with that. But I've definitely been more okay with saying no to things and not feeling so beholden to kind of abstract responsibilities. Like, so I just like, we have these faculty meetings at our university that all professors are supposed to go to. I look at the agenda. If it's nothing really of interest to me, I'm just not going. So I should be. I've been trying to work from home more. Going back to Dawline's point about the email, my students will email me late at night asking for extensions and things. And it used to be I would email them right away, no matter what time it was. And now I just let it sit there for a while. I'll get, if it's late at night, I am not answering that email. I'm going to do that the next, I might read it, but I was like, I'm just going to let this sit. And then also just being okay, so much of what Dawline said resonated, because I'm still not taking enough time for myself. But one thing is, since doing the piece, I've actually got a therapist who I love. And she was pointing out all the little ways that I can take care of myself. So just lying on my couch and watching a movie and being okay with that and not grading while I'm watching a movie, which is how it used to be, or feeling really guilty that I was, just sitting, so trying to be more okay with that and just building in those moments. And again, trying to be okay with it, not caving into the pressure of what my profession says I should be doing. Because the thing with being a professor is there's never a time when you're not supposed to be doing something. You could always be researching, you could always be prepping a class, you could always be grading. There's never a moment when you're really done. And if I had known that about the profession, I'm not 100% sure I would have gone into it. Because that's just like, I really like a sense of completion, and you just never get that like in academia. It's never over. So just being okay with like not doing something is something I've been really working on since the piece.
Yeah, it's intense. It's a lot. And Sara, did anything change for you?
So when I had the pleasure of having the tour with you and many others and saw the work for the first time, my husband Bobby was there as well. And, something definitely shifted after that day. This is the age old battle of, who does more housework and who's, we both have our things. And Sawyer, we talked about this, I think at the beginning of the project, is that a lot of times, in every family, there's a CEO of the house, right? Who keeps track, ticker tape, like when the kids' appointments are, or when they need new shoes, or, when this play date is, or that school event, or for my daughter, the millions of appointments and all that scheduling. And after that, I think he knew it before, but then he saw it, and then he was reading all of the other pieces that weren't about specific subjects that you have, that were just kind of more statistics about how uneven it is for women in the labor force. And so I've delegated some of my unpaid labor, but like, actually I didn't delegate it. I think he just took it on, which has been amazing. So that's one big change. I am very impressed with both Dawline, Jane, and Lauren, because I wish I could say I've stopped answering those late emails, or have respected my own boundaries more, because I'm in a new job. It's hard. It's very hard. And I feel like I need to prove myself. I feel like I need to go above and beyond. And even with like positive verbal feedback I'm getting in my paid labor, like, yeah, Lauren, I identify with what you said about, it's just never done. There's always more to do. There's always a new project. There's something, more advanced we could be doing for this client. There's new, we're pitching, potential new clients. And then at home, I have the same feeling with my family, especially my daughter, of like, there's always more to do. I should be helping her walk. We just got hand railings installed in our home, because she's 6 years old. She's on the cusp of walking. She walks great with a walker, and she's starting to walk with just a little bit of support, which is amazing. And so, I should be spending all my evening hours walking with her and playing with her. And obviously after a long day of work, that's really, really hard to do. But yeah, I think the shift in responsibility at home has been a big change. And I'm thinking more about trying to pull those boundaries at work. So yeah.
Great. One thing that I heard going as a thread going through all of your answers is feeling the shoulds, which is the root of a lot of trouble, as we all know. But it sounds like you're all sort of pushing back against that, which, like Sara, you're saying, like, I admire those of you who are succeeding in that. I'm not so great at pushing back against the shoulds. And I still answer the late night emails, but it's a process. I think now it's time to see if we have any questions from the audience. Michelle?
Yes, please drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to be called on. Thank you so much for sharing so openly and authentically. It resonates so deeply. I think all of us are experiencing something very similar in our different worlds that we're in. I actually have a question for you, Sawyer. It came to me while listening, of how has your practice and your labor been informed or changed by learning about all of these stories of each of the people you're interviewing? because I know that this project extends so far and can take up so much of your thought. I know your studio is at your home, so what is that boundary like for you? And just anything you can share about that. I'm really curious.
Well, first of all, people are always asking me, well, have you done your data? Yeah, I've done my data. And it looks similar to everybody else's in the project. You know, not trying to make it a message about like busyness so much as like competing pressures and the shoulds and feeling, like Lauren, you were saying, it's like, yeah, you could be sitting down, say like, okay, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to sit down and watch a movie, but then feel bad about it. So it is about the hours, but it's also about the headspace that it takes to get yourself into a situation like that. So having seen my own data and seen the data of so many other women, I have tried to set better boundaries, especially now that my studio is at home and my kids are a little bit older. They're 11 and 14. So I can tell them, hey, it's my work time and I need like this quiet time. And not feeling bad about that. I think that was the thing that would get me the most, was telling the kids, no, I'm not available to you right now. I am available to you most other times, but not right now. So that was a big one for me, that having gone through this process has made me aware of, that I wasn't even aware, because the societal pressure, especially on parents, but especially on mothers, I think, is that you're available 24/7 for for the child's every need. And I don't think that's healthy for me or for the kids. So I think it's probably, to all of our benefit for me to have realized that. Yeah. So what I have found is that even though everybody's story in the project and other people I've talked to, everybody's story is different and unique, but there are themes that run through them, separate from the individual circumstances. So I try to see myself in them whenever appropriate and adjust accordingly.
Thank you for answering. I think Amy has a question.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I like so much of this is resonating for me personally, and some of the conversations, I have with other moms and women who work and have kids. And Sara, I feel like you talked a little bit about how your partner responded when he learned about the labor that you perform via this project. And I would love to hear from the others if your partners or your families or your broader communities were made aware of this project, and were they surprised, or what was their reaction to learning about this in a visual way, what your labor is?
I guess I'll go first. I am single, so I think that, and also everyone kind of knows or knew, I think, about a bit of like, what I was up to. So yeah, there was not a lot of out-facing stuff that I did, kind of autonomous in that way.
Yeah, for me, my husband was well aware of how much I work. One of the struggles that we've had in living in Ohio is that until my mom moved here very recently, we didn't have any family in the area. So, it's very much a tag team, like right now he's playing Barbies so that my daughter won't come interrupt me. So that, yeah, there was no really surprise among friends or family. And one thing I'll say, because I was thinking about this after Sawyer asked me to participate in this today, it kind of, I don't know how to describe it. I almost felt not guilty. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like, it was not surprising to any of my colleagues because it's the life of all of my colleagues. And then I kind of was having a bit of insecurity, like, well, like, I'm not, why am I the representative? Because a lot of my colleagues and friends are kind of in actually worse situations. So one of my very dear friends who is currently chairing her department at Denison, she's a department chair, she's an artist, she's a mom, but then also her wife just recently injured herself. They were putting up an art installation and she injured herself, so she had to have surgery. So she's chairing department, she's teaching, she's taking care of their daughter, she's taking care of her wife who has had to have shoulder surgeries and all this. And then they're also fostering a newborn baby. And it's like, wow, I thought I had it bad as chair. Like, so then I was like, well, like, so nobody was surprised because it was like, yeah, I was like, so, but as I said, I almost felt, I don't know, guilty, like kind of, because as I said, so many of my colleagues, are going through the same or even more stressful situations. And so, yeah, and actually people really, really loved that it was books. That was like the biggest reaction I got. They were like, that's so cool. They're books, like, because I hang out with a bunch of nerdy academics. So everybody was into that.
Lauren, that what you were saying, I wanted to follow up on about, how do I choose the stories? Like, and I never want it to be like a competition of, whose burden is the heaviest, and I'm sure you understand that, but, it bears saying anyway, like, it's not like I said, every single person's work story is different. There are common themes. So you are not the representative. Nobody in the project is the representative of whatever issue their work brings up. They are simply a representative of what their work brings up. And, the way that I look at them, it's like there's data about these situations. For example, I used your story to talk about women working in academia while parenting, and yeah, there's definitely like lots of people doing that. But, in order to take the data and make it approachable and understandable, somebody's gotta be the face of it. It's like without the human connection, we're gonna have a very hard time getting the message across. So thank you for being a representative of, a larger trend in labor. But I think honestly, your story is very compelling. I'm sorry about that woman's wife, but it's hard. But it's, everybody who's going through it, it's hard.
We have time for one more question. Okay. Melissa Ray.
Hi guys. So my question is for those of you who have set your boundaries of I'm not going to work right now or this is my time. Have you received pushback from, other entities that you work with, whether they're coworkers or outside contractors or, anybody that's, outside of like your view? How do you deal with that pushback? Sorry, my dog's decided to have a chase right now. But yeah, how do you deal with that pushback and what do you say to really stand firm in your boundaries?
I would love to take a crack at that one. Because I just also listened to a podcast about this, about setting boundaries and what to expect when you're enforcing those boundaries, and this can be related to work or personal relationships or anything in your life. By setting that boundary, you're changing something, right? And there's going to be a reaction. That's physics. Like there's going to be a ripple because you're saying, I'm not doing that anymore. And that's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, maybe. Probably, right? Most times you're used to giving, we as women are used to giving and putting ourselves last. And then when we stop doing that and say, no, I need this time for me, you know, whoever that's impacting might not like that, or it's just, you know, and so you got to be, and I'm working on this. So I'm like, I feel like I'm giving advice for something I can't, you know, I still am working on, but, you know, being okay with that discomfort is really important when you're enforcing your boundaries. And I wish I could just like talk to myself, you know, because I think at home and in my relationships where I feel like I'm on really solid footing, I can do that more. But then in my paid labor or my job, or, you know, then, and I feel like if I feel like I'm letting others down, or I'm letting people on my team that work for me down, then it becomes harder. But yeah, I think there's always something that there's always a response, or like, you know, a ripple effect to setting and holding up boundaries.
Yeah, just kind of thinking about that. I think a lot of the times, like, the call is coming from inside of the house. And so it's like, you know, it's like that expectation that people are going to react a certain way. In a very real sense, at the time when Sawyer and I first had this conversation about this labor, I was recovering from burnout. And I think that burnout is a word that's thrown around a lot. In my case, it was like literal mental and medical burnout, and, you know, paying the price with your health. And I'm still suffering those effects, really puts that front and center that it is not a healthy way to do it. Like when you hear about like, oh, there are these businessmen that like dropped dead of heart attacks from like at work, from like, it's an actual thing that can happen. And so I actually refuse to die for a job or really anything else. And that's the line that I draw. And so, you know, also now, as someone who works as an administrator with other folks, I think that it's intrinsic to like work culture and work respect, that we respect each other's time and boundaries, so that things don't lead to resentment. And so I've been able to kindly but strongly enforce that, not just for myself, but for my team, because again, like ultimately, you know, I think it's, again, like kind of like not tying this to any morality. It's not to hurt anyone's feelings. It's literally for my own health and sanity. And so of course, like, I love myself and I want to take care of myself. So I need to hold this boundary, and that's really it.
So I've been fortunate that I haven't had pushback on the professional level, because tenure is glorious and wonderful, and it's made me really I don't know, it's made me better about setting my work boundaries, because, you know, there's not much they can, well, there's nothing they can do. So to be honest, but I mean, obviously I still work hard, but you know, going back to so much of what Dawline is saying is really resonating, because I keep thinking about this meme that I've seen about, like, you know, don't kill yourself for a job that's going to replace you, you know, the next day. But for me, I've actually kind of inverted it in that my university, like a lot of university, has gone in a very particular direction where they're not really valuing the humanities, and I'm a history professor. And so when people retire or pass away, like, they're not being replaced. And those positions are going to kind of business programs, or the sciences and humanities and the arts aren't really being valued. And so I keep thinking to myself, like, I'm not going to kill myself for a job that doesn't value me enough to replace me if I die. And so I've been pretty much, and I'm also lucky at my job in that I feel like my department right now, we're all on the same page in terms of how we're feeling about our professions and the need to balance that with our health and our personal lives in the context of a pandemic, right? And what being in the classroom and being with bunch of college students who were just germy on their best days. You know, like how much are we willing to sacrifice and willing to risk to be working in this moment? I think everybody in my department's on the same page, and my current department chair is a very close friend of mine. So, you know, if I'm behind on something, and well, first of all, nobody's going to check on me if I'm behind on anything, but it's, you know, she's completely on board if I'm not going to go to a meeting or something. But in terms of personally, and kind of like what Sara was saying, like that's where the pushback happens in the unpaid labor, because, you know, one of the things that has happened post this art piece is that after my grandmother passed, my mother moved from California to Ohio to live near us, which we're very happy about. But that also adds another layer to my caregiving. I'm an only child, so that means that I'm the only one to deal with my parents who are divorced, so I can't deal with them as an entity. Also, I have an aunt who I'm very close to who's unmarried, so I'm also kind of recognizing that I will be managing her care at some point. My mom's not very old. She had me when she was quite young, but she's high maintenance. And this, you know, living in Ohio is very new to her. So, you know, she treats me kind of like I'm Google, like anything like that she could possibly need or look for, she'll ask me. And so when I put boundaries on her, like that's when there's pushback, because like, you know, I'm her daughter, she's her mother. I'm supposed to be lovingly helping her with all things. And the mantra that I have to keep repeating to her and to my daughter and to my husband is, I have a job. I have a job that I need to do well at and keep, and y'all need to figure things out. And so that's when there's, you know, pushback and hurt feelings, and especially for my mom, not so much for my husband and daughter, but that's where I'm still working very much on setting boundaries and maintaining those boundaries. And that's where it's really hard.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We're at 2:00 right now, so we gotta bring it to a close, but this has been absolutely fast. Like I knew it was gonna be good, but this has been amazing. Hearing your stories and hearing your insights into you know, the patterns, what it all means, how, you know, how you can help yourself do better and be happier. And thank you so much to our panelists and to New Museum Los Gatos and all the sponsors of this event who made it possible for us to be here talking today.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Sawyer as well for having your artwork in our museum, and I invite all of you to come visit. It's open until January 23rd. So plenty of time to bring your family and your friends and learn more about these incredible women. And thank you to Sara, Dawline, and Lauren. So with that, have a wonderful weekend. Rest. Don't reply to the emails. And we'll see you at our future programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.